while everyone else crashes under stress. A rare few operate with unshakable clarity. The difference isn't talent. It's an ancient mental architecture most people never discover. There's a pattern that shows up everywhere you look at peak performance. From samurai warriors to Roman commanders, from chess grandmasters to elite negotiators, they all share something that has nothing to do with their specific skill. They built mental operating systems designed to function when everything around them is falling apart. Take the samurai. Their entire training wasn't just about the sword. It was about cultivating what they called Mizu no Kokoro. Mind like water. Drop a stone in water and watch what happens. Perfect response to the impact. Then immediate return to stillness. No lingering ripples of emotion. No rumination. Just clear, precise reaction followed by calm readiness for the next moment. This wasn't poetic metaphor. This was survival technology. A samurai who let anger cloud his judgment died. A warrior who froze in fear became a casualty. So they engineered their minds with the same precision they forged their weapons. Mental clarity wasn't optional. It was the difference between breathing and bleeding out on a battlefield. Now shift to ancient Rome. Marcus Aurelius ran an empire while fighting wars on multiple fronts. Every morning, before making a single decision, he ran a mental simulation. Not visualizing success, preparing for disaster. He'd remind himself that people would betray him, that plans would fail, that unexpected crises would emerge. He was pre-programming his response patterns before reality tested them. This is the core insight most people miss about high-performance mindset. It's not about believing everything will work out. It's about training your mental response system so thoroughly that when chaos hits, you don't have to think, you execute. Eastern philosophy took a different angle, but arrived at the same destination. Buddhist monks spent years mastering detachment not as cold indifference, but as mental clarity. They understood that suffering comes from trying to control what can't be controlled. So they trained focus under pressure. They built the capacity to observe chaos without being consumed by it. Here's what connects all these approaches. They recognize the mind as a system that can be optimized, not through wishful thinking or positive affirmations, but through deliberate architecture, through protocols tested under the most extreme conditions imaginable. And the critical part, these systems still work, not because they're ancient wisdom, but because they were forged in situations where mental failure meant actual death. When the stakes are that high, you don't get philosophical theories. You get practical technology for mental performance. The question isn't whether you can build this kind of mind. The question is whether you're willing to abandon the default programming you've been running and construct something that actually works when pressure arrives. What happens when your operating system can't handle the load? Your mind is crashing and you don't even realize it's happening. You wake up, already reacting to notifications. You scroll through comparisons that make you question your progress. You absorb opinions that weren't asked for. By a.m., you're running 50 mental processes simultaneously with no clear priority system. And then you wonder why clarity feels impossible. This is what happens when you operate without a mental framework. Every input gets equal weight. Every crisis feels maximum priority. Every setback triggers the same emotional cascade. You're not weak, you're running buggy software that was never designed for the complexity you're facing. Think about it differently. Imagine trying to run advanced graphics rendering on a computer from 1995. The hardware can't handle it. The system freezes. That's exactly what's happening in your mind when you try to process modern complexity with default mental programming. The hidden cost shows up everywhere. You're burning out, not from working too hard, but from processing inefficiently. You're anxious not because life is inherently overwhelming, but because your mental operating system treats everything like an emergency. You're missing opportunities not from lack of talent, but from decision paralysis when pressure arrives. Here's the brutal truth. Most people never upgrade their mental software. They keep running the same reactive patterns they learned as kids: fight, flight, freeze. Those patterns worked for immediate physical threats. They fail spectacularly for complex modern challenges requiring strategic thinking and emotional regulation. But there's another way. A mental architecture built on principles that have survived centuries precisely because they work under pressure. Not theory-tested protocols from people who faced consequences far more severe than a bad quarter or a difficult conversation. The Stoics had a framework: control the controllable, release everything else. Sounds simple, but actually implementing it requires rewiring how you filter reality. It means training yourself to immediately categorize every situation. Can I influence this? Yes. Then act. No? Then why am I giving it mental bandwidth? Military strategists throughout history understood resource allocation at the mental level. They knew that attention is finite, energy is finite, so they built decision protocols that conserved both. They didn't waste mental energy on scenarios they couldn't control. They focused entirely on the variables within their influence. This isn't about being cold or detached. It's about being effective, about building a mind that doesn't waste processing power on things that don't move the needle, about creating mental efficiency that translates directly into better performance when stakes are high. Share in the comments if this is hitting different for you right now. And here's where it gets practical. You can start building this architecture today. The question is how? Why the first hour of your day programs everything that follows? Most people lose before they begin because they hand over control of their mind within minutes of waking up. Phone unlocked, notifications flooding in, other people's priorities becoming your mental real estate. 15 minutes into consciousness and you're already in reactive mode. That's not a morning routine. That's surrendering command. Now consider the alternative. What if the first 60 minutes were dedicated to calibrating your mental operating system? Not as some mystical ritual, but as technical maintenance. This is exactly what high performers have done for centuries, and continue doing today with modern tools. Morning calibration isn't about waking at a.m. or meditating for hours. It's about intentionality. 10 focused minutes beats 2 hours of scattered routine. The question is, what are you programming into your mind before the world makes demands? Marcus Aurelius wrote every morning not gratitude lists, but hard conversations with himself about how he wanted to process the day ahead. He reminded himself that irritating people would appear, that plans would collapse, that unexpected problems would surface. He was pre-loading response patterns before reality tested them. Translation for now: 10 minutes before opening any screen. Ask yourself, what could go wrong today? How will I respond when it does? This isn't pessimism, it is strategic preparation. When adversity arrives and you've already mentally rehearsed your response, you react technically instead of emotionally. Here's the next level: mental weight training. Your mind is muscle. If you only use it in comfortable environments, it atrophies. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, negative visualization, not to spiral into anxiety, but to desensitize the mind. When you mentally rehearse loss before it happens, the actual emotional impact is reduced. You've trained for that scenario. Think about elite athletes. They don't wait for game day to face pressure. They simulate high-stakes situations in practice. They train under artificial stress, so real stress feels manageable. Your mind deserves the same protocol. Modern technology enables this. Apps for guided reflection, digital journaling, programmed reminders that interrupt autopilot and force conscious thought. The tool doesn't matter. Consistency does. 10 minutes daily of deliberate mental calibration outperforms 10 hours of passive motivational content consumption. And something deeper is happening here. When you train your mind deliberately, you stop being a passenger in your own life. You build agency, and agency is actual power. If this content is adding value, hit the like button. It helps the channel continue. The framework exists. The question now is integration, how you make this automatic instead of effortful. How mental architecture transforms pressure into competitive advantage. Surviving is baseline. Anyone with basic discipline survives. But there's a level above that, where the mind doesn't just withstand pressure, it converts it into fuel. Where chaos isn't threat, it's opportunity. And that's the real objective of building an unshakable mental system. When your mental operating system is optimized, something shifts fundamentally. You start seeing openings where others see obstacles. While most people panic at uncertainty, you process quickly, decide with clarity, and move while they're still frozen. This isn't luck. It's direct consequence of a mind trained to operate under pressure. Consider elite negotiators. They don't win because they have more information. They win because they maintain mental clarity when the other side is emotional. Think about championship athletes. They don't dominate purely through physical gifts. They win because their minds don't freeze at critical moments. Look at entrepreneurs who build empires. They face the same obstacles as everyone else, but they process differently. The ripple effect compounds. When you operate from mental clarity, people around you notice. Your presence changes. Relationships improve because you're not emotionally reactive to everything. Your career advances because you make better decisions under pressure. Your mental health improves because you're not living in constant survival mode. Here's the truth nobody mentions. The world doesn't reward people who merely endure. It rewards those who thrive. And thriving requires a mind that functions when everything around it is chaotic. It's not about perfection. It's about being operational when it matters most. The mental frameworks that survived centuries weren't abstract philosophy. They were practical advantage. They were about building something internal that nobody can take from you, about having clarity when others have confusion, about taking action when others freeze. Think about investigators analyzing complex cases. They're not smarter than everyone else. They've trained pattern recognition under pressure. They've built mental models that filter noise and identify signal. That's not natural talent. That's constructed capability. The same applies to you. Every situation you face is data. Every pressure point is training. The question is whether you're deliberately building mental architecture or just reacting randomly to whatever shows up. You have two paths. Continue running default mental software, vulnerable and reactive, or start today, building something unshakable. The choice was always yours. The difference now is you know another way exists. Tested, proven, available. What nobody tells you about building mental systems that last. Here's what separates temporary motivation from permanent transformation. Systems beat feelings every single time. You can get hyped from a video, a book, a conversation, and that energy fades in days. But when you build actual mental infrastructure, it operates independently of how you feel. This is the secret embedded in ancient frameworks that modern self-help misses completely. The Stoics didn't wake up feeling motivated every day. Roman soldiers didn't feel like training in freezing rain. Samurai didn't feel like facing death with calm. They had systems that functioned regardless of emotional state. Your feelings are weather, constantly changing, unreliable for navigation. Your mental architecture is bedrock. It's there when storms hit, when you're exhausted, when everything feels impossible. That's the difference between someone who performs occasionally and someone who performs consistently. Think about the compounding effect. One day of mental discipline means nothing. 100 days starts building neural pathways. 1,000 days creates automatic response patterns that feel like instinct, but are actually engineered capability. The mind you have right now is the result of every mental habit you've repeated for years. Conscious or unconscious, the mind you'll have a year from now depends entirely on what you start programming today. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Today. And here's what makes this different from every other performance advice you've encountered. This isn't about adding more. It's about upgrading the operating system so everything else runs better. Better decisions, better emotional regulation, better focus, better recovery from setbacks. When your mental foundation is solid, everything built on top of it becomes more stable. Your career moves become more strategic. Your relationships become more resilient. Your ability to handle complexity increases. Not because you're doing more things, because you're processing everything more effectively. This is how people seem to operate. At a different level. Not more hours. Not superhuman willpower. Better mental infrastructure that makes difficult things feel manageable and manageable things feel easy. The frameworks are here. The principles are clear. The only question remaining is execution. And execution starts the moment you decide the default programming isn't acceptable anymore. If this video shifted something for you, subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Drop a comment on which part hit hardest.